In November 1966, the small, quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, became the staging ground for a mystery that defied the natural world. Late one night, two young couples cruising through a local wildlife zone encountered a towering 7-foot-tall winged figure. As they sped away in panic, the creature took flight, keeping pace with their car while fixing them with glowing red eyes. That encounter ignited a relentless 13-month wave of high strangeness across the Ohio Valley. Soon, local police and newspapers were overwhelmed by reports of strange lights maneuvering in the sky, and residents receiving bizarre, garbled phone calls at all hours of the night. Then came the strangers. Witnesses reported visits from pale men in immaculate, anachronistic dark suits who drove pristine vintage cars and spoke in disjointed cadences while demanding silence about the sightings. Point Pleasant became a site of localized high strangeness, an intersection where disparate paranormal events converged to shatter the community's sense of a stable physical world. Mainstream scientists and skeptics quickly arrived to impose order on the chaos. They argued that the terrified locals were simply misidentifying regional wildlife in the dark. One primary suspect was the rare sandhill crane. Standing nearly as tall as a human with a massive wingspan and a distinct red patch of skin around its eyes, it offered a plausible biological explanation for the giant bird sightings. Ornithologists also pointed to the snowy owl. When caught in the glare of headlights or flashlights, an owl's eyes can shine bright red, reflecting artificial light back at the observer in a startling way. Meanwhile, traditional UFO investigators arrived with their own rigid framework. They tried to wedge the Ohio Valley events into the extraterrestrial hypothesis, treating every light in the sky as a physical metal spaceship piloted by visitors from space. But biological animals and mechanical spaceships could not account for the totality of the reports. Flesh and blood creatures do not generate telepathic premonitions, and interstellar astronauts don't shapeshift into pale men in dark suits to harass rural teenagers. To truly grasp what was hunting the people of Point Pleasant, investigators had to abandon the search for physical invaders from the stars and begin examining the unseen layers of our own reality. The concepts that would eventually contextualize the West Virginia events emerged in the esoteric circles of the 1950s. Academic and occultist Meade Lane proposed that the strange craft filling the post-war skies were not physical rockets traversing the vacuum of space, but rather ether ships. Lane's interdimensional hypothesis suggests a parallel, vibrating dimension of subtler matter exists in the exact same coordinates as our physical Earth. Entities travel not across physical distances, but by tuning atomic frequencies, lowering vibration to materialize into our visible spectrum and raising it to vanish instantly. By bypassing the mechanical constraints of interplanetary space travel, Lane's model provided a coherent physical logic for entities that can walk through walls, manipulate human consciousness, and evaporate into thin air. In 1966, investigative journalist John Keel arrived in Point Pleasant to cover the sightings. Immersed in fringe theory, he was uniquely positioned to document the chaos. After conducting rigorous, on-the-ground interviews and tracking the overlap between local ghost stories, UFO sightings, and monster encounters, Keel discarded the alien hypothesis entirely. He concluded that humanity was dealing with ultraterrestrials, ancient, non-human intelligences that do not visit Earth, but actively share it with us. Looking at this electromagnetic spectrum chart, Keel proposed the concept of a superspectrum. He argued that these entities naturally exist as energy in the upper frequencies, completely invisible to the narrow band of the human eye. Keel viewed the Mothman as a temporary, shape-shifting construct of energy, condensing into physical form only to interact with the local population. Keel argued that these intelligences deliberately manipulate human perception. They project forms that align perfectly with our contemporary cultural fears, appearing as medieval fairies, or religious apparitions, or space-age monsters. By mimicking the cultural fears of the era, the entity functioned as a feedback loop. It cultivated specific human beliefs and then manifested new horrors to reinforce them, a cycle Keel described as a control system designed to manipulate human consciousness. The 13-month reign of terror in the Ohio Valley did not slowly fade away. It ended in a sudden, cataclysmic disaster. On the evening of December 15, 1967, during the height of rush hour, the Silver Bridge spanning the Ohio River collapsed, sending dozens of vehicles plunging into the freezing water and leaving 46 people dead. Immediately following this mass casualty event, the local Mothman sightings and the accompanying wave of high strangeness abruptly ceased. This precise timing left investigators grappling with a dark, unresolved question. Did the energy surrounding the creature cause the structural failure, or was it acting as a modern banshee, appearing as an omen of impending death? The collapse firmly anchored the phenomenon in tragedy, elevating the winged entity from a bizarre local cryptid into an enduring mythological harbinger of doom. John Keel's synthesis of these terrifying events sent shockwaves through the global community of paranormal researchers. With the publication of his findings in The Mothman Prophecies, traditional ufology was permanently fractured. The evidence from Point Pleasant forced researchers to stop scanning the skies for physical spaceships. His work paved the way for credentialed scientists like astronomer Jacques Vallée to formally abandon the interplanetary model and adopt the interdimensional theory as the most logical explanation for these anomalies. Their research reframed UFOs, cryptids, and religious apparitions as a single integrated system that monitors and directs human thought through carefully staged theatrical events. The ultimate legacy of the Mothman is a terrifying modern demonology. It suggests we are not being visited by travelers from across the galaxy, but stalked by unseen entities that inhabit the space between spaces, resting just out of sight, waiting for us to notice them. On the afternoon of June 24, 1947, the modern UFO phenomenon entered public consciousness above the Cascade Mountains in Washington. Pilot Kenneth Arnold described 9 objects moving like saucers skipped across water. That specific imagery was quickly transformed by headlines, which reported the arrival of flying saucers and birthed a global media sensation. Military and civilian authorities struggled to categorize the sudden influx of reports, attempting to investigate and interpret hundreds of sightings from witnesses across the country. The public and the press rapidly adopted a dominant assumption. If these were structured craft in the sky, they had to be mechanical spaceships piloted by biological entities from other planets. This extraterrestrial hypothesis became a rigid paradigm. The world assumed these visitors were interplanetary travelers, bound by the same laws of physical space as humanity. However, the extraterrestrial framework faced a severe challenge. The reported objects consistently defied the established laws of Newtonian physics. Witnesses described craft performing right-angle turns without deceleration, moving without the effects of inertia, and instantly changing their physical shape. Most baffling was the object's apparent ability to materialize and dematerialize out of thin air. If these craft were physical machines traversing the galaxy, their own momentum would have destroyed them. The assumption that they were interplanetary voyagers was proving inadequate. Newton Meade Lane, an academic, poet, and former university department head, operated outside this mainstream assumption from his base in San Diego. Lane had investigated the unknown long before the 1947 craze, establishing the Borderland Sciences Research Associates in 1945. His methodology rejected standard astronomy. Instead, he synthesized the era's emerging atomic theory with 19th-century esoteric traditions to find a new explanation for the phenomena. Lane relied on a practice known as transmediumship, extracting specific scientific frameworks from entities channeled through his associate, Mark Probert. By blending atomic physics with the occult, Lane created a framework designed to address the specific physical anomalies that the interplanetary model could not resolve. Lane defined etheria as a parallel, invisible dimension interpenetrating our own physical space. Matter exists on a vast spectrum of atomic frequencies. Our reality is only one narrow band. Ether ships lower their vibratory rate, intersecting with Earth's atomic structure to materialize. Increasing their vibration, they exit our spectrum, creating the illusion they vanish without inertia. Lane claimed these ships were piloted by Etherians, advanced ultraterrestrials who appeared as guardians to guide humanity through the atomic proliferation of the 1950s. His interdimensional hypothesis resolved the UFO physics paradox by redefining the craft as energetic projections that functioned beyond the constraints of matter. Lane's reliance on seances caused his work to be rejected by the scientific community. He died on the fringes of the field in 1961. By the late 1960s, mainstream researchers hit a wall. The extraterrestrial hypothesis failed to account for a growing wave of reports involving strange, localized anomalies. A new generation of researchers, including J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée, began to realize the phenomenon overlapped heavily with psychic and interdimensional concepts. Researcher John Keel adopted Lane's concepts to explain the shape-shifting anomalies and paranormal outbreaks he investigated in West Virginia. The marginalized theories of an occultist provided the conceptual framework required to move the field past its extraterrestrial dead end. Meade Lane's legacy remains significant for its attempt to merge atomic science with a reality that exists beyond sensory limitations. His work shifted the search for the unknown away from distant stars and toward the invisible spaces interpenetrating our own. The greatest mysteries of the universe may not be located light years away in outer space, but vibrating at a frequency humanity cannot yet see.